welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. This channel is dedicated to amplifying the voices of doctors and other healthcare professionals and patients as they share their unique struggles, triumphs, and passions. My mission is to build connection and create advocacy for healthy doctors, driving positive change that benefits both doctors and patients. This is a space for everyone who cares about the future of healthcare. If you appreciate this content, please like and subscribe now. It really helps the episodes reach our target audience. And I would like to welcome Dr. Asha Padmanabhan and Dr. Christopher Behringer. Thanks for joining us today, Asha and Christopher.
Thank you. Excited to
Hey,
be
very good to
here
be
and
here. Yeah.
apologize for my voice. It's a little off.
That's okay. It actually sounds husky. So that's
Yeah.
so that's fun. You'll like to remember this. It's not your regular voice. But I'm so happy to have you both. And by way of a brief introduction, Dr. Asha Padmanabhan is an anesthesiologist, speaker, podcast host, author, and owner of Leadership RX Coaching, helping women physicians develop essential leadership skills. And Dr. Christopher Behringer is an American board certified family medicine and lifestyle medicine physician and keynote speaker, currently based in South Central Kentucky, helping to drive patient centric and holistic healthcare for underserved populations. And today we'll be talking about how the two of you were my very first LinkedIn conversations after I took a brief break following my most recent surgery and in the new year on January 2nd. So I talked to you both on the same day, and the connections that I discovered is that you're both passionate about physician wellness and advocacy, and you both speak to and are involved in physician leadership. So I thought this would be a great conversation, and that's why I chose to have you on together. So thank you again. And I always start by asking, what would you most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation? And feel free to include hobbies. Christopher, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I guess something that I like for everyone to know about me is I like to be a lifelong student. So ever since started school, I haven't been out. So after I finished my residency, I went ahead and started doing the lifestyle medicine, and then after that, I went ahead and finished up an MBA, and now I'm actually doing a bachelor's in history, which is one of my primary passions. I plan to go on into a master's for it with a focus on medievalist history, early medievalist, kind of colloquially the Dark Ages, specifically England.
Wow, that's really incredible. Thanks for sharing that. And Asha?
Well, that was fascinating. I totally agree with you, Chris, on being lifelong learners because I find like every few years an itch to learn a new skill. So totally identify with that. So for me, you did a great job in introducing me, Kim. A couple of things I would love to add is that I am very passionate about physicians and advocacy, and I am the current president of the Florida Society of Anesthesiologists, which brings its own challenges being a physician who is involved in that kind of political advocacy. Apart from that, as you said, I am really very passionate about coaching women physicians and giving them the skills to be a strong leader and really even to recognize that without even a leadership title or a role, we are all leaders and to embrace that fact, which I find is many women physicians have so many imposter thoughts that prevents us from really shining in this field. So that's something that I would love everyone to know is that we as physicians need to be at the table, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's in the state level or at your national society, because everyone needs to hear our voice.
For sure, and that's why I have this YouTube channel, right? And it's called Stand Up for Doctor, so you can raise your voices. And that's great. And Christopher, I'll start with you. I'd like you to share a brief story. What is your why?
My why is actually it all started when I went into medical school, mostly for financial reasons, because my previous music career was not working out. And so I had the grades and I was in, to make it into medical school as a, financially secure stuff. However, by the time I got into my second year of medical school, I started realizing by helping out through the TA program, I helped start a TA program for the osteopathic manipulation lab And I started realizing, hey, I really like taking this material and making it more enjoyable, making it teachable to these students. And then when I got into rotations, going to patients who are sick and in the hospital or in the clinic, scared and things like that, and actually being able to use my performing background to bring laughter, joy, happiness to these people, as well as being able to take information and make it digestible for them and kind of allow them to see, like apply stuff to their own health. I mean, I started realizing that very similar to when I would teach music and it allowed people to enrich themselves. And I could put on events, I could put on concerts, I could network other musicians together to do these things. I was starting to do this in medicine as well, making information more digestible for patients, allowing them to embrace health as not just a thing I have to do, but a thing that is enjoyable to do. It's almost like finding out hobbies within health, such as cooking or exercise or physical activity or anything like that, any kind of enrichment. And so what I realized was that it's not necessarily that, you know, I want to be a doctor necessarily. It's just that being a doctor allows me to do everything that I want in a way that feels very impactful, in a way that feels like I'm doing the most that I possibly could with my passions and skills. So that would probably be my why, is that this is just where I feel the most impactful. And it's so broad. Like there's just such a vulnerable populations, from doctors to patients to everyone, that you can help affect. So yeah, that is my why.
Well, thank you. I love all of that. And Asha, if you would like to respond to anything that Christopher said, and then also share your own story.
Sure. I mean, we identify so much with all the same things. And I'm going to give you two different whys. My first why is why, as a physician, I continue to do what I do. And, just not that long ago, a few weeks ago, I walked into a patient room, and as an anesthesiologist, we don't have much time to build our connections with patients. We have literally 5 minutes before, in one of the most stressful situations of a patient's life. And I try to make that time very impactful and try to get the patient to relax. And the minute I walked in, with this particular patient, I realized that 5 minutes was not going to be enough because this patient was in tears. He was in a what would seem to be a very um, what's the word?
Anxious or
He was anxious, but you would have thought that was a guy you would meet on the street and would be fearless.
oh.
And yet he was in tears. And it took some time. I sat with him, talked to him, kind of got him to open up a little bit about his fears. And by the end of that, he was clutching my hand and he was like, Doc, you need to be a psychiatrist because you just helped me through this part. And then I saw him afterwards, after surgery, and he was telling everyone there that he saw in the recovery room how wonderful I was. And that's kind of why I continue to do what I do, because that's some of the most challenging times of a patient's life is undergoing surgery, and to be there for that person and to have that recognized was really beautiful for me. The second why is really on why I do what I do with my side, with my coaching and all of that. And it's to be the mentor and role model and the connector and coach that I felt the lack of as being a woman leader in medicine, which when I was gotten to that position was a very lonely place, and not knowing enough people to get the skills that I needed that were not taught in med school, that were not taught in residency. And so to be that kind of resource. And every day when I get texts from my coaching clients who say, I heard your voice in my head, and so I did not let my imposter thoughts keep me down. Or when this situation came to me, I remembered what you told me, and now I feel so much better. So that's my why, is to be that kind of person.
Wow, that's terrific. And this is kind of a coincidence that I just a half hour ago got off recording a podcast with Kevin MD and Dr. Stephen Pierce and Bruce Berger. And there we spoke about motivational interviewing. And I won't get too much into it in this podcast, but motivational interviewing isn't trying to motivate the patient, it's understanding their concerns and their why. And you just illustrated that beautifully. And that was what our we wrote an article about it. how motivational interviewing transforms, patient and physician relationships. And you're perfectly demonstrating, a story speaking to that. So thank you. And Christopher, anything you'd like to share speaking to what Asha said, and then you can get on to what you are doing now in regards to like physician wellness, advocacy, leadership.
Yeah, no, I really resonate with Dr. Asha here said, and that's because whenever patients are with a doctor, they're at an inherently vulnerable position. Surgery, even in clinics and everything else, there's an inherent power discrepancy. There's like a power dynamic going on, and doctors are just kind of instinctively seen as, we should be seen as a source of comfort for these patients. And it's just so nice to be able to kind of be that beacon in like the chaos and the darkness of like, I don't know what's going to happen with my health. So it's such a beautiful thing. In terms of things that I'm doing now, a couple of things I'm working with is I'm faculty for the Lake Erie College of Osteopathic Medicine, and so I do lectures for medical education as well as the family medicine didactic. So I get to help out with that and provide a lot of mentorship for students. One of the lectures I give is medicine as a career, very much upfront. This is the burnout rate. Upwards of 70% of you are going to leave your first job after residency in the first 5 years. Do you buy a house? Majority of doctors are going to want to retire before 60. How do you plan for that? Things like this. Make it a very real thing, as well as, hey, here are all the opportunities outside of clinical medicine to stay within it. I usually give an exercise called 5 Ways to Fulfillment. And in summary, what it is can you think of 5 ways you can be a doctor that's not clinical work? So that's, immediately you can think of things like political advocacy, designing products, working in well-being and coaching and things like that. There are so many different ways that you can kind of do things, and that helps tap into the passion of medicine. And that way, you don't just get burnt out on clinical work and discard the whole profession. You can still provide help. The other thing is I am working with two organizations right now. One is the Bureau for Emerging Leaders through the American Osteopathic Association. This is a group of people who are kind of newly graduated out of residency and help work with the leadership of the AOA to help affect change for the profession as well as healthcare as a whole. And I'm also part of the organization Medicine Forward, which, yeah, so I've been working very closely with them. Kim here actually got me connected with them, and I've been working with them to set up things like an intern program and to set up more operationalization of their processes. And our goal there is to help, optimize the physician-patient relationship, right? Is to try and to like bridge that again and to decrease burnout, increase physician engagement, satisfaction, things like that. So those are all the different things I'm involved in, as well as just my regular clinical practice, right?
Yeah, that's a lot, and it's all awesome. And a couple things that stood out to me from what you said is talking to doctors about planning their future early. And sometimes, like I've had doctors tell me that it was always the next thing. What's the next thing? When you're in med school, you want to get into good residency, then a good attending, and then once you're attending, you're like, what's next, right? And to just think about your future is really important, and to set more goals. I think that's great. And then also finding joy outside of medicine, because I know that that's some of the issue as well, that when doctors only define themselves by their career or being a doctor, that can cause some, issues as well. So Asha, anything you'd like to add to what Christopher or I said, and then, continue on?
Yeah, I wish I'd had you as to teach me, Christopher, when I was in coming out of med school and residency, because I think that is so key that we prepare people for what the realities of life as a doctor is. Because I certainly never had that. And going into medicine at a young age, we all feel like this is going to be our life for the rest of our lives until we hit some of those points of where we end up either burning out and dropping out or, really what we call now quiet quitting, right? Silent quitting, where you're there and working, but not really engaged and passionate. So I wish that had been there. So thank you for doing that. And I totally see that that's where, even looking through my own journey, there were times where I felt like, is this it? Is this what I worked so hard for? And being in mid-career by then, it was kind of like there was no other life outside of medicine. And it took some communities like this that I'm now part of, which showed me that there are other avenues. And ironically, just getting into those avenues made me more passionate about medicine.
Mhm.
So that does really help to have those outside interests. And I applaud you, Chris, for showing people, what are your passions and don't give up on them just because medical school and residency are say take such a toll on us that we need to put some things aside for a time. But that's kind of what I work with as well within my coaching practice is to help people identify what gives them joy within medicine and outside medicine. So it's not so much of how do I take the next step of my promotions or my next leadership path or whatever. If you don't balance that with your family life, then you're just not going to last long. So I help with that. The other part I'm more involved in now, just being this year of presidency, is more advocacy for physicians and for patients in Washington, D.C. and in Tallahassee here in Florida. And I think that's really important as well because as physicians, we're not trained in advocacy or we are not trained to look for what really affects our life outside of medicine even in, I mean, what actually affects our life in medicine, we're never taught that that can have such a huge impact on our career. The decisions that are made in the centers of political government affect our lives, which we don't know. So that's something I'm really involved with right now.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. Before we go back to Christopher, I will just love that both of you have found ways to stay in medicine, because we need doctors. And I myself, I've said it multiple times, now that I don't have a thyroid, like I need doctors to keep me alive. So, we really need doctors in the work that you're both doing, and that you've found by doing other things that's fueled your passion. And I've heard many doctors say that, so I love that, to stay in medicine. So thank you for continuing to practice, because I've had 5 surgeries in the last few years and I would not have wanted to do them without anesthesia. So we need you. Even though I don't do well with it, it's better that way than without it. So I thank you. And go ahead, Christopher.
Sorry, repeat the question one time for me.
Well, did you want to respond to anything that Asha or I just said, and then you could continue on a little more about what you're going to plan on doing more about physician wellness advocacy and leadership?
Absolutely. Now, everything, like I said, it just, resonates so very strongly. Um, I think one thing that, um, Dr. Asha here and Kim, and it's one thing that's interesting and seems to sometimes, I think, get lost on general public is physician well-being and advocacy for physicians, right? I feel there's sometimes a reduction of, well, you guys make so much money. Why should we advocate for you? Like, right? Like, what's the point of advocating for you guys? You guys are smart. You guys are making lots of money. What's the point? And then it's 6 months until your next doctor's appointment because that's the next opening. And therein lies the problem, right? Um, and it's not because doctors are trying to be, greedy with their time or anything like that. It's just that we're just getting so burnt out. And so this call for physician well-being, this call for physician wellness and stuff like that, it's just all, so very important for just society at large. In terms of things that I have coming up is just trying to, I'm now working with a new employer, and I'm trying to get a lifestyle medicine department kind of going and to try and get that realm of more awareness around health and things like that, both on a patient aspect, but also for providers, to be able to say, we can tackle chronic disease at its core, which is one of the biggest burdens on a lot of providers is just that burden of chronic disease. And I'm going to be continuing working with groups like the AOA, with the Bureau for Emerging Leaders. And I'm just very excited with things like Medicine Forward to continue to leverage organization relationships that they have to try and get more coordination with groups like the Lorna Breen Foundation and Kern and different state medical societies. So that's kind of my primary thing right now. I'm working with a lot of undergraduate interns who are pre-medical, and I hope to also branch out to get like university affiliation so that we can kind of really get people from starting at like 18, 19, just getting started and getting like that mentorship pathway, that advocacy pathway started then from an effectual standpoint and not just from a like existential theoretical standpoint.
I think that is fantastic because that's what I've been talking about lately is that the culture of medicine has to change and it has to start in, med school. And what you're saying is so very important. And I could see that, Asha identifies as well. And when you were talking about, why advocate for physicians and that, they've lost a lot of autonomy and they can't practice the way they want to practice and they can't treat patients the way they want to treat them. And a lot of that, filters into the moral injury and all of that. So I totally understand those things. And that's why the work that you're doing, so not only are you doctors, that you're also, doing these other things to support your colleagues and for the future of medicine. And that's just so important. So, Asha?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear more about medicine forward that you're talking about. And I think I totally agree that we need to not just, tell doctors to be more resilient. That's such a buzzword, be more resilient. Well, what does that mean? I mean, to be in the system and be told to do one more thing to be more resilient or attend more workshop doesn't really work. You have to start with the problems right from uh, you know, the beginning, med school residency, and then the career in the outside world has to be, there are so many things going on in this world, in even in our country, that's related to healthcare, and that's where we have to start. But we also have to give our physicians the tools to take care of themselves.
Right. And I think that's where the resilience can come in because I fully understand why some doctors are turned off by the word of, resilient and you need to be more resilient. But resilience doesn't mean blame the victim. And the system does need to change. But in the meantime, there are things that individual physicians can do to support themselves. And that kind of means kind of going through challenging times and coming out, better on the other side, right? Which might
Right.
lead to a good question. As I was wondering if you'd each like to speak to, Christopher, what has helped you overcome challenges?
I think one of the biggest things that helped me overcome my challenges. Give me 1 second. I move over to Asha because I think my cats are having a bit of a spat. So I'll
Oh,
be right back.
okay, okay, fighting cats. We can accommodate that. So, we don't
Well,
want this to turn into a brawl.
no, we don't want cat fight in the background.
Yeah. So, Asha, what has helped you overcome challenges?
I think it's a deep inner, I mean, I would hate to say the word resilience, but grit
Mm.
and more of an unwillingness to hear the word no or unwillingness to face defeat. And that's really kept me going in terms of anytime I've faced challenges, which there have been many, and in the past and coming up in the future. And just to not let that put me down or defeat me has really kept me going, and support of course, family and a really good circle of physician friends and community that has held me up. And that's
Yeah,
really,
that's beautiful. Yeah, and having a supportive community is so important. And whether it's, people you work with or like LinkedIn community or family that we found, that's really everything. And Christopher, Asha shared that, grit and family support and finding a sense of community are a few things that has helped her overcome challenges. What helped you overcome the challenge of your brawling cats?
My cat got locked in one of the closets, so that's why he was meowing. I had a dryer delivered, and so one of the doors just got closed on him, and so I just let him out. He
Okay.
is he
So, what has helped you overcome other challenges? Oh, there's the cat. Oh, I'm glad you're okay. What's the cat's name?
fine. So I think one of the biggest things that helped me overcome my challenges was to embrace medicine as an art. Um, and what I mean by that is, I was musician. I used to do dance and other things like that before. And just like how you can be a musician by playing um, an instrument. You can be a singer. You can work in the music industry by helping organize concerts. You can see it as this field. I approached medicine the same way, and I started seeing medicine not necessarily as my job, but more as an extension of myself. So similarly, before, yeah, I loved organizing concerts, right? I loved organizing concerts and networking musicians. And now I can use those skills to put on like well-being events and CME events and other things like that, and use that in this impactful way, or put on like group classes. And I used to teach kickboxing classes when I was in residency for the community and things like that. So I really liked being able to, over time, kind of like I, it's I stand on this camp of, it's weird to look at medicine as, and well-being in medicine as, a work-life balance, because a lot of that equation usually treats work-life balance as the way to get more balance is to do more life and less work. So it kind of denigrates and makes work negative in some capacity, which might be fine in many other professions, but in our industry, it's dehumanizing. It's just like, we're supposed to enjoy our work. We're supposed to feel passionate about our work. We're doctors, like these are our patients and stuff. Yeah, we can be burnt out with the paperwork and the other things like that. But if you use the solution of, well, you need to, you only need to prioritize like personal time and things like that, um, you run the risk of just demonizing the entirety of working as a physician, and kind of demonizing the whole interacting with patients. I'm not saying that you don't protect yourself. Of course, I'm saying you should be doing that. But when the uh, answer to the algebra of work is a negative and life is a positive, how do we get equals a, how do we get a net positive, is, decrease your work, increase your life. Um, One, people suffer, and two, it kind of puts this negative cloud over your what you've just dedicated the last, what, 11 years of your life to training for. So, but for me, just realizing that when I go to work, I'm just expressing myself like I would as a musician, or when I go to the gym, that's just who I am, or when I pick up, play music here, I go do this or that. It's just who I am. And are there work aspects related to that? Yeah, just like everything else. Do I necessarily want to practice my scales and modes all the time? No. But does it make me a better musician over time? Yes. Do I want to sit here and chart? No. But if I don't click that send button, the patient doesn't get their prescription, right? So I think there are analogs to this, and so just over time, I've been able to reframe medicine for me as, again, an art form that has, you know, uh, ways of expressing yourself, and just over time, it's become more and more of a, this is kind of just who I am, uh, with some work put into it, rather than trying to put myself into work.
Yeah, I love that. And that reframing is really important. And I can understand what you're saying. And other doctors too are, are kind of cringing at the work-life balance term. And I think the word harmony resonates a little, right? Because it is like and it related to music too, right? Like harmony. It's like all of the pieces together. And when I had that interview a half hour ago with Kevin MD and Dr. Stephen Pierce and Bruce Berger, and Steven said now when he enters the room, he feels like he's entering into like a sacred relationship with the patient, and just seeing it like that. And it's all about connection, right? And, even in life, right? That all of us, that when they say, we're walking each other home, is, and if you can appreciate those individual connections with your patient, and like Asha gave an example too, I think that's all beautiful. And as we start to wind down, Asha, was there anything you wanted to speak to about our topic of physician wellness advocacy and leadership, and any tips that you have for your colleagues?
I think it's really important for us to know that we matter, whether that it comes from the patient, or it comes from our colleagues. I think that appreciation holds us up and keeps us going, because for too many times we don't really get to hear that. Now, it might be with me being as an anesthesiologist, we really don't get to see our patients over a period of time, and we don't get to see that, but that really matters. Anytime I walk into a hospital room or a hospital OR and the nurses tell me, "Oh, we're so glad you're here," that is what was one of the reasons I keep going back. So for patients, for staff, appreciation of your physicians when they're having a hard time really matters. And for physicians, just to echo what Christopher said, is find passions, but passion, your work is your passion as well. We've spent so many years to get where we are, and we went into it for a reason. I don't know that I know any physician who went into medicine just for the money part, because there are other easy ways to earn more money than this. It's so, keeping that passion alive is what it really matters. And the last part would be for, women I coach, women physicians, that we really, really need to be there at the table at when decisions are being made. And we need to use our voice for that.
Yeah, absolutely to all of that. And I love the way you share. And actually, I said that in the podcast recording today, you matter. And that's sure. And I think during your training, you might get more extrinsic motivation or feedback from other people. And then once you become an attending, especially in certain roles like a pathologist, nobody's walking around saying, great job, right? But they hear about it if they miss something or get it wrong, right? So some of it, I think, has to be like intrinsic motivation and just knowing internally that you matter, but also to raise awareness for other people to thank their colleagues and to thank doctors. And that's why I'm trying to make a huge impact for Doctors Day. And I want everyone to send a thank you note to their doctor. And it doesn't have to be Doctors Day. And also for colleagues to thank their physician friends, whether it's people from residency or other attendings. Just let them know when they're doing a good job. Let them know that they matter. So I think that's fantastic. And Christopher, what would you like to wind down and share?
I think, yeah, it's finding that, I agree with Dr. Asha. It's finding that passion. I think when we go into medical school, residency, and other things like that, when you're applying to medical school, what are they looking for? Well-rounded applicant, right? Like leadership, research, residency, well-rounded applicant. And so you engage yourself with a lot of these different activities and ways of engaging with the medical field, and then um, you're not necessarily you get out of the workforce and they're not necessarily looking for a well-rounded employee. They're looking, at the end of the day, medicine, is a business, and they're looking for revenue generation. And to some extent, that can be altruistic to just sometimes just keep the lights on, right? Like you just have to keep the lights on and have a facility. And so it can be hard when you're raised in a system for, like I said, 11 years, right? Like 4 years undergrad, 4 years medical school, at least 3 years residency, so 11 years plus of being, like you said, extrinsically motivated to engage with these different ways of medicine. And then once you enter into the workforce, the only extrinsic motivation is clinical work. It's very unilateral. And so it can be I encourage people to protect those activities, to protect those sorts of things, because, uh, and it can be very hard to not to earn that to get extrinsic motivation to do other things, because sometimes the only extrinsic motivation we have is like our production, right? Like that's kind of the only thing that we see. And it doesn't matter how much of a jerk you are. It doesn't matter how low your patient satisfaction scores there are, like at the end of the day, because guess what? There's a 200,000 doctor shortage coming up here in the next 10 years. It doesn't matter how much of a jerk you are, you're going to have patients at the door. And so there's very little motivation for change unless you yourself want to change.
Mm.
And it's finding those ways and connecting with groups, and getting in with medical societies and nonprofits and all these others to embrace that, to protect that, and to kind of discover ways that you can protect that and stay in the profession and continue to love it.
Mm. Yeah, that's terrific. Well, I want to thank you both again for being my guest today. This is really a great conversation, and I'm going to have you send me any links that you wish to share, how our listeners can get in touch with you, and I'll share that in the notes, the episode notes, and also on LinkedIn. And I end by saying, in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Thank you.